I also wanted to, do the big five and all the other stuff, and I came to a question while I was over there: really, should we even be engaging in tourism in Africa, because some of it appears to be quite destructive. Um, but look, my granddad loved Africa. He loved the peace, loved the stillness and serenity of being there on the river. So it was a good chance for him to uh, be remembered. I'd invite any comments throughout the course of the talk. Just interrupt, ask questions. Yes, you can see where I went. Okay. Is the pointer?
Oh, okay.
Okay, you can see where I went. I did a couple of trips with Intrepid. They're an ethical tourist company, a commercial Australian company, and I also did some extra travel from Entebbe, which is in the northwestern corner of Lake Victoria and up the Nile, the Victoria Nile River. People in Africa are very resilient. They're resourceful. They make things work no matter what they have. They make the most of everything.
This is the other.
Yeah, okay.
Educate.
Thanks. I'll do that. All right. This is over in the very southwestern corner of Uganda in the Burundi Impenetrable National Park. Plutarch called it the Mountains of the Moon, but it's one of the two areas that actually has mountain gorillas still in the wild. In the back of this video, you can see the mountains. That's the Virunga Mountains in the Republic of Congo. People provide housing. NGOs provide housing in Africa. Rich people build houses with tin roofs and then migrate back into the traditional housing much of the time because it's practical. Mud huts, we're going back to mud huts in Australia and sustainability. They can be repaired at no cost. Every mud hut with thatch roof also has solar panels. An NGO provided these imitation huts, and you can see they're not very well populated. I think we can all guess why. Very hot in Uganda. This is housing, Intrepid style. I like to get close to the earth, and so we stayed in these tents for most of the time. Until we did have one night, courtesy of my kind husband, who said, "You got to lash out," so I did stay at the Nile waters, which is up near some rapids on the Nile River. It's just such a beautiful place where the boat is there. That's where there were otters frolicking there in the bulrushes early in the morning. In the centre was our campsite, Serengeti, where our guide actually stayed up overnight with a big torch just in the hut behind us, just to keep a watch on it. We could see green eyes of buffaloes. And one of the girls opened up the tent, and there was this buffalo, a lone buffalo, face to face with her. She just zipped it up and then shot up. Oh my God, out of there! Another girl who was a little braver opened the tent. Raymond, there's a lion! So for the rest of the trip, it was Raymond, there's a lion. So Raymond had his big torch and came down and stopped around, made a bit of noise and scared the lion off. But I was lucky enough to take a balloon trip across the Serengeti in the dawn, and so we saw a lot more from the air I can see why, people would want to get drones over national parks because they're not really committed. We saw hyenas dens with all the pups coming out early in the morning and these kind of long shadows. It was really spectacular. Permaculture is a big thing in Uganda. Everywhere in Africa, I guess they invented it to some degree, apart from Wilson, but they utilise every little scrap of land. This is the road reservation, and they'll put in annual crops and get a couple of crops per season because it's, in this along the river flats, it's fertile, there's lots of rainfall, it's very warm, and they do a good job in replenishing some of the green waste into the ground. And NGOs are also there promoting. I know there was a story of an NGO that was developing a wonderful plantation of tomatoes right along the river, and it was growing really well, teaching the people about it, doing the seed saving. One night, in the morning they came out and the whole thing was decimated because the hippos had discovered, hey, it's stuff, thank you very much. NGOs also have a bit to learn. Not everybody's kind to animals. These are just on the back of the truck, tied up, waiting to go to market. I didn't actually see the footings of this until the next day. We actually had a party on their deck the night before. So luckily it still survived. Lake Bunyoni is also down near the Burundi National Park. It was considered one of the hill villages, a very fertile, beautiful place to be, but population pressures have had an enormous impact around that area. Now, this is just on the edges of the national park, the Burundi National Park. So you can see there's eucalypts growing there. Eucalypts grow really fast. They grow better in Uganda than they do in Australia because of good deep soils, warm weather, and a heap of rain. So they really grow very, very well. And there's lots of terracing there. I didn't see a lot of erosion, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of leaching of the minerals and the carbon out of the soil. But people have a small plot and they farm it intensively. But once again, there used to be gorillas here on this hill. So we went trekking to find some gorillas in Uganda. There are 3 countries that do gorilla trekking. At this particular spot, there are 3 groups a day allowed to go and find one separate troop of gorillas each. So we had a guide at the front and a guide at the back. We also had 2 armed rangers with us, with Uzis or AK-47s or something. And we were told that was to keep off any wild animals that might come. But with the political pressures in Uganda, it's quite likely there to keep off Ugandan opposition who live in the Congo want to come and create a fuss, or potentially poachers. So we were after the Bushara group of gorillas, and we were chasing them. They had trackers that went out in the morning and found where this particular troop had nested overnight, and the trackers were following their droppings, basically to find out where they were by the time we got there. We started very early in the morning. But this group kept moving, so we were trekking up through the tea plantations and up and down dales. It was a long way. And then finally, when we got close, they lost the telephone signal. And so they were calling out, the rangers in our group were calling out to the other trackers with sort of guerrilla sounds. And they said it was to communicate where they were, because the sound echoes around in this little dome. But I think it was also to allow the guerrillas to know that there's another group coming through. They do a habituation of the guerrilla troops, where they send a person in for a couple of years just to gradually sit closer and closer to allow the guerrillas to see them as being non-threatening, then they bring in extra people, and ultimately they think it's safe enough for other people to visit. So there's about 1,000 mountain gorillas across East Africa. They're all vegetarian. They have distended stomachs, but she is pregnant. The stomachs are distended because of the amount of food they eat. COVID did run through the Ugandan gorillas. I believe they lost a few, but we all had face masks on for our trip. The gorillas will climb about 20 metres up a tree, it's a big strong tree, to get fruit, which is a prime thing for them. But the fruit trees are in the lower altitudes, and those lower altitude areas have been encroached on by farming. So there's less fruit now for the gorillas to eat. Sometimes the vegetation is so close you couldn't see the gorillas. You could sort of see a little bit of black hairs just from here to the front row, and you could hear them masticating gorillas. But they're so lovely. This particular group had 17 gorillas and 2 brothers who were the silverback males dominant. One of our members was forever getting closer and closer to the gorillas and taking photos. So he'd click on his camera. And sometimes gorillas would just turn around and face the other way, like, I've had enough of you. But one did turn around and started to make a false charge towards his fellow. And the guides were there. I didn't know they were there. They were just sort of standing hiding in the jungle. And it would have been 2 or 3 seconds and these guides were out there. And they had big long sticks and they banged the sticks on the ground. So that must be part of the habituation, I guess. So yeah, we started right on the other side of the gully and came up and over through some of those ridges and clefts and had to go over there and come back again. We were exhausted. It was 33 degrees and mosquitoes were terrible because you couldn't wear insect repellent. Now they told us it was because wasps are attracted to the insect repellent, but maybe it's because the smell of the insect repellent upsets the gorillas. So that was it. So we got down to the Kazinga Channel, which is between a couple of lakes near Queen Elizabeth National Park. All these holes in the bank, and they're bird's nests of the pied kingfisher. Absolutely gorgeous bird. Kingfishers are amazing over there. There's plenty for them to eat. Striped. Are these striped so far, Graham? Yeah. Just magic to take some of these birds. Superb starlings. And it's surprising for such a brilliant, viridian, iridescent bird, but you just can't see them in the trees sometimes. Just the lilac-breasted roller is the national bird of Kenya. Beautiful bird. Apparently has a good song. And flamingos, my travelling companion Kathy, my school friend, had a lifelong ambition to see flamingos in Africa. That's what we did.
So we're not seeing so much of the white.
So I'm sure you know flamingos are pink because of what they eat and the red algae they consume. And they also eat with their heads upside down. So they have little holes in the top of their beak to allow the water to flow out as they funnel through. Fascinating. The crowned hornbill, raucous, terrible sounding bird. Probably terrible birds. The marabou stork, really. It's like white ibis on steroids. They also urinate on their legs for sunscreen, but they smell terrible and they're quite tall, standing about 1.4 metres tall. And they have typical stork's nest, but they do stay mated for life. The glossy starling, Hildebrand starling. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to take in photos of birds. You'll be lucky I didn't put all the trees in. Okay, the crested crowned crane is the national bird of Uganda. Also stand quite tall and big half more. Just fascinating. They also mate for life and actually found in pairs as they were a predator. We saw chimpanzees also up towards Queen Elizabeth National Park. They're up in the tops of the trees, so we didn't get a great view, but it's nice to not disturb them, just to be sitting or standing passively on the ground and watch them doing their natural stuff. Chimps, of course, do eat meat occasionally, catching other monkeys or birds and stuff. The baboons are like the pigeons. They come around and scavenge everything around. They're quite aggressive. They're the ones who were, as soon as you open the side of the truck and start unloading the foods and things, then they'll be in there after bananas. You don't approach them. Lucky to see some black rhino at the Kuru, and the white rhino, as you probably know, is misnamed. It's not a huge difference in colour, but it's actually the wide rhino, not the white rhino, the wide mouth. Different sorts of giraffes. I didn't know there were different sorts of giraffes. You're all scientists, you probably knew that. So there's the Rothschild's giraffe on the left and the Maasai on the right. I'm not going to spend too much time on the animals, but I'm sure you all know that hippos stay in the water all day because they get sunburned if they don't. They float, but they don't swim. So if they want to get to the other side of the river, they have to sink to the bottom of the river, go along the river, and then come back up for an egg, take it down and start walk across the river again. Well camouflaged Nile crocodile from 1911 or something. Crater. It's in the Maasai Mara. It's a large crater. It gathers the clouds, so it gathers the rainfall. It's very fertile, very quite heavily populated with animals. This is the dry season. It has both the sodic water for the flamingos and fresh water gathered from the clouds. Absolutely well worth seeing. Chameleons. This is down in Tanzania, near the foothills of Kilimanjaro near Lesotho. It's just so well just camouflaged, aren't they? Until they climb a stem, I guess, and change colour. But it's like a dance. Sure, you use nutmeg. I just didn't know that mace was the little red strip over the nutmeg itself. So it's nutmeg and mace. There you go. You can do that. As I said, not too many trees, but just a couple of acacia pods. I thought it was fascinating. This is the whistling one. A little wasp bores into there's a ball with spikes about this long. It's absolutely terrible. And a wasp bores into the middle of the ball, the seed pod. It lays eggs, the larvae eat the seeds, and then they come out. And so when the wind blows, it's multiples. It's lovely sound. The Maasai, one of the Kenyan groups, they migrated down to the Sud in the 15th century with their cattle. And part of that is because slavers had decimated the population in the southern Sud and they gathered them down to the highland, basically. So there was a bit more space for them to come down. They settled in the area which was Nairobi. Nairobi means sweet waters. It's a good fertile area. And then the British colonials came in and decided that Nairobi was just a perfect elevation for a railhead. So they kicked the Maasai out to the west, so they went out to near the Nile River. And then they got kicked out again because safari tourism started in the late 1800s. And so, this very cattle-centric group of people have been moved voluntarily once and involuntarily twice. There's a bit of a political push in the Maasai area now to to get some more land. You can see why. The cattle, this is the end of the dry season, but the cattle are emaciated. The NGOs have done a great job of reducing child mortality, but they haven't been so successful in changing the culture. There are still multiple wives, there are still many, many children, and so the population is growing quite a lot. So that's adding to the pressures on the Maasai environment. This lady, however, is one of the myriad of good ones. She was married at 11 to a very old man and widowed shortly afterwards. So she was discovered by a nun and who managed to get her through an education, and she's become a teacher, and she is now trying to also save women, girls, from getting married too young in exchange for cows. It's hard to know where to look when you go. This is the Maasai and that's the Serengeti. The Maasai and the Serengeti are the same place. It's just across the border between Kenya and Tanzania. So the migration comes out from the south. You know, animals know no borders. There's no border control there. Happy lion just resting against a little signpost. That's my dog Simba doing exactly the same thing. It's an aged lion. You can tell by the poor condition of the mane that it's old. So he comes to the trucks taking tourists around, and people will throw water or put down some water. Oh, poor lion, poor lion. But that's not really the way it should be. But this older lion, because he has relied on lionesses to co-hunt by himself, he used to start sometimes. So desperate straits. But you can see in the background there there's a whole cluster of four-wheel drives and obviously looking at something. On Intrepid, we were told, you know, if the driver is too close to something, just tell them to back off. They have the radios on loud, because they're all chattering about, oh, there's a leopard on this rock and we can't hear. But it's just really, it destroys the environment for the animals. It's all the background. And these elements, so across this little creek, and we're obviously following the path to just cross the road just behind us over here. And all these other four-wheel drive rammed up the road and stopped right where they were about to cross. Get some good photos. So yeah, you've got to have some responsibility in managing your guides. It's just Dar es Salaam, and we're about to head off to Zanzibar. But we won't go much into Zanzibar. People are resilient, they're resourceful. One guy on the side of the road just using a fire and burning some other rubber to repair boots. So a woman is picking up some bricks. People make bricks by the side of the road. They make some bricks in somebody else's kiln, make themselves a kiln, and then they make their own bricks. It's money for nothing, apart from labour. And then I flew to Entebbe and went to Ginger, which is the mouth of the Nile River on Lake Victoria. The Nile heads from Lake Victoria north all back to Egypt. Beautiful place. Big problem with water hyacinths has diminished, so it's good. So just near Entebbe is the Namamba Swamp. It's about 2,500 hectares, and there's got 12 of the shoebill stork in there. So we went looking to find the shoebill stork. And looking. So I had to paddle myself some of the time to encourage the guides to keep looking and looking and looking. But it didn't happen. I did not see the shoebill stork over there. So then I went up to Namatsagali. Namatsagali is on Victoria Nile, further up the river. People would come by train from Mombasa to Kisumu on Lake Victoria. They would then catch a ferry from Kisumu up to Ginger. get on the ferry, on the rail again at Ginger, head up to Navisigala, because you couldn't use a boat through the lower part of the Nile because of too many rapids. It just wasn't happening. So there was this hop step through East Africa for the British to regain control for the British government, because Tanganyika, then Tanzania, was a German protectorate. The King of Belgium had the Congo, so it's all about colonialism, expansion. My granddad there, he was a marine engineer, and he met a British politician on one of his boats because there was money to be made in Africa young man. So being a good Scotsman, that's very good. And before the war, he was reassembling flat-pack ships on Lake Victoria. They would come out from Scotland, go on the train at Mombasa, come across to Lake Victoria, and then he would, rebuild these flat-pack steamers, like 300 feet long. However, after the war, he served on Lake Victoria in the war, and then he became the captain of the paddle steamer heading from Navisigala north up through the Victoria Nile. And that was for the East African Railways. They were carrying coffee, corn, they call it maize, a lot of cotton for the cotton mills in England, skins and ivory. This is 1919. And so the paddle steamer would push 3 barges in front of it up the river with the current heading north and go around Lake Kyoto to all the sites, come back down against the current. So Navisigala used to be a big port in the 1920s, and you can see the lifting devices there in the black and white photo, taking the cargo off the barges, putting it straight onto the track, which came right next to the port. And a couple of those gantries are still there. And Pop will tell us stories about how he would walk back from the port to his captain's house, and he'd have to take a big stick to scare the crocodiles off the pathway. So surprisingly, the captain's house is still there because it's township of Navisigala has been sponsored by an NGO, set up a university there. It's not very active now, like many NGOs that were very, but the town still exists because of the university. And this is called the Hippo Way because the hippos would come out of the river at night, head up along the road, and then go across to the floodplains where all the vegetables were. So it's nice that it's still called the Hippo Way, but they haven't seen hippos since 1963. So I went on the second squelch through the mainland as well. I was pretty keen, wasn't I? Pop used to talk about this bird, and he said that the local people would do this sort of sound when they're out. Instead of saying the word, it's kaloli or something, just in conversation, instead of they didn't use shoebill, stork, of course, in their local language. That's what they call, because that's the sound the shoebill makes. So another squelch, and eventually I saw the shoebill stop. I'm happy. So these were the footprints at the Serengeti outside our tent with the people and the lions together. So still progressing together. So are there any questions at this stage about Africa? Any comments? Did I get the birds right? All right. So the next thing I want to talk about briefly is the Sydney Heritage Fleet. I've been a volunteer with Sydney Heritage Fleet for a couple of years. I got my qualification as the general purpose hand at 62, and now I'm working on the tugboats for the Sydney Heritage Fleet. I've also had the privilege of travelling as a crew on the James Gray from Hobart back to Sydney early last year. So the Heritage Fleet is different to the National Maritime Museum. The National Maritime Museum at Darling Harbour gets funding. We work closely with them, but we don't get government funding. They do. We run the boats that actually go out and sail. They've got the Endeavour. So we had heaps of boats. We operate about 6 of them. The James Craig, which you may have seen around the harbour, was a coal hub in its storage stages down in Tasmania, and then it was sort of abandoned, and it drifted a bit within the bay, became a navigation hazard. So we blew it back out of it so it would sink. But sunk into the mud and basically preserved it because it was iron. But 1874 was sort of this transitional stage between sail and steam, and the iron ships they don't rust, steel was too expensive, wood rots. So there's this little narrow window of opportunity where an iron vessel can be restored. The first steamships came out in the 1830s, but sailing ships were still operating until the 1950s. So the Heritage Fleet saved the James Craig from that halt to its current operating position. The Heritage Fleet started with the Lady Hopetoun, which is a coal-fired steamer, quite small, and it takes about 20 passengers. It's the best way to see the jacarandas on Sydney Harbour, to take one of these little cruises. In November, October, it's beautiful. It's got a triple expansion steam engine, which was pretty good at the time. And it being originally a government boat, it had all the princes and kings and queens and presidents all come on board. And when the Apollo 11 crew did their wonderful trip around the world to celebrate the moon landing, they came on board. And just before he died, Neil Armstrong came back to Sydney and said, I wanted to go on this vessel one more time. So he just came back as a private citizen. And then on the Lady Hopetoun. Waratah, we also operate. It was originally called the Burunda, built at Cockatoo Island. It operates now, still also under coal fire, but it takes 24 hours to get enough heat in the boilers to get it started, whereas the Lady Hopetoun then takes a couple. Waratah takes cruises around the harbour very often, and she's got the smoothest hull. She just glides through the water. It's magic to see the Waratah going. John Oxley is our current big project. It's just about ready to launch. It was used for maintaining the lighthouses and lighthouse keepers, properties and supplies up and down the coast of New South Wales. She sailed herself out from Scotland in 1927. A couple of other small boats that we use for, usually errands or trips for the National Maritime Museum. So down in Hobart, when I was up on board as crew, we had some lovely weather going around Three Capes in Tasmania. It's nice and calm here. So you can see we've got the sea lines up because you need them to hang on to as she goes. So she rocks a bit, but she's very stable. Nice. I didn't get up to the top of the main mast. My knees would not get me over the tops. But I did get out on the bowsprit, so that's pretty exciting. But it was a wonderful trip. Absolutely loved it. Thank you, Bill. But when it was really rough, only the crew on duty could go on deck. And when you're on deck on duty, you can't take the camera because that will distract you, or you don't have two hands because you're doing something. So it's hard to get the photos.
What time of year?
That was February last year. There's the Wooden Boat Festival, which is held biannually between Hobart and Sydney. Hobart was 10 times better than Sydney. So that's what it is. Okay, so, the Sydney Heritage Fleet has been in the news lately because they're going to evict us from our Roselle shipyard, because that will be resumed as part of the increased housing around a new rail station that will happen at Piedmont. And there's nowhere vacant around the harbour that's suitable for us. So we'll put out a bit of a campaign and the state government has told us that we will be accommodated in the end of White Bay in the future, but there's no lease nothing. So we shall see what's going to happen. That sort of ends my talk. There is one more YouTube video which goes for quite a while, so I won't play that yet. But are there any other questions or comments?
Because of YouTube, one might ask a question, come up and say about computer science. The speaker can hear you what you say. Hello. No.
But if you haven't,
I thought we were going to talk about rainfall.
okay, the marine engineer born in Scotland. He was the youngest ever chief engineer for the Orient line, which later merged into P&O. And he was on the mail ships between Sydney and England most of the time, in the Orient ships. And that's when he came out and bought some land in Australia because he liked the look of it. And he brought his family out to Australia, his sisters and his mother at the time. And then when he met this fellow and said that there's money to be made in Africa, he joined the East African Railways and was working with the flat pack ships there. He served on Lake Victoria during World War I. And he said it was very odd because prior to World War I, they were travelling around the lake. The southern part of the lake was German, the northern part of the lake was English. And so suddenly all these fellows who used to, work and play together, suddenly enemies and shoot each other. So he was on that, but the war in Africa finished earlier than the war back in Europe. So the war in Africa was over a couple of years earlier. So that's when he was working for the government, for the railways, and running the vessels up the river.
Where did his wife live?
So
Where did his wife live?
she was from Switzerland. They met in Australia. When he came to Australia, he migrated here permanently about 24, 25, and he met her in Australia. He had a furniture factory. She was in the office, but she was from Switzerland. So he wasn't married when he was in Africa. He was about 40. But,
The other question, you talked about the picnics there. Are they the same now in coming east?
no, because they're harvested. The people actively grow them in plantations that make great telegraph poles, and they use them also for farming and building everything. So yeah, they haven't become a problem. I didn't notice any in the jungle. I'm not sure that anyone would bother to weed in a national park. What the animals don't eat, might become a problem. Yeah, but it's possible that there could be in the future.
I've got the honour of saying thank you. It was a wonderful speech. Well, yeah, I'm going to see you. Come and give you a camera. I'm sure everyone enjoyed that. It was a great speech. Interesting to see a little bit about Africa, and I've never been there, but maybe one day I'll try and get there and not disrupt the locals too much.
Yeah, you can do that.
It's sage advice not to overrun a country or a continent like that. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much.
A little present for you. I don't know if you already have one, but you can have
Not
another one.
finished.
A bit late in the year, but thank you.
Artifacts that from my granddad. From the necklace is from the Maasai people when he was at Kisumu, and the others are Busoga up the Nile River.
Okay, well, that was a pretty fascinating topic. And I've been in that part of the world chasing that rare bird in Uganda. We saw it as well, but it's a lovely part of the world, Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya.
Yes.
Lovely people and fantastic animals and birds. Brought back a lot of good memories for us. Thank you.